everyone. Happy fourth night of Hanukkah. Merry upcoming Christmas. Happy whatever you celebrate. I'm here with my lovely wife, Jenny, who is putting up with me for an hour extra this week. I don't understand why she would want to do that, but she made the decision to do it. Everyone, welcome to Dentists in the Know. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. It's live. It's definitely going to be a light show tonight. Live and over several cocktails because tonight, as promised, we have a dentist sommelier who's going to be joining us. We're going to be tasting 3 delicious French varietals, and we are so excited to have all of you. So aside from being blessed with our spouses tonight, you guys are going to have a lot of fun. Grab a glass of wine, grab whatever you want to drink, and let's just have some fun tonight. As you know, I'm with my great friends, Dr. Jennifer Bell and her husband, Brian, and with Dr. Chad Duplantis and his lovely wife, Ellen. We're all excited to be joining you tonight. We are all dentists. Well, not all of us. I can't even say that. We're all business owners. And we're all educators. Our job is to bring you guys in the know.
And with that, it's time for the news. Are you going to stay with me?
I mean, I can.
Yes.
Yeah.
I never get to have company when I do the
I'm here
news.
for you.
I'm always alone. They leave me out here by myself. So last week I talked about the changes potentially coming out for antibiotic prophylaxis for joint replacement. We didn't talk too much about it because I wanted to have time to digest the article that came out in JADA. But it seems like it's really pushing more towards very conservative use of antibiotics in general as a prophylaxis treatment for joint replacement. The study came out of actually North Carolina at Charlotte at the Carolinas Medical Hospital, and they showed no significant difference between those who had received dental care under antibiotic prophylaxis and those who had not for outcome of secondary infection related to joint replacement. Now, the real question will be, will our orthopedic colleagues get on board with these recommendations and start to look at the data coming out? And as we discussed in one of the posts a few weeks ago, the adverse outcomes of overprescribing antibiotics and resistant bacteria. And we're constantly trying to balance that. Not to mention, we're currently in an antibiotic shortage. And so if there are opportunities that we can be conservative in our use for antibiotics, seems like we should be looking for those ways that maybe we don't have to prescribe for our patients as frequently. So I thought that was an interesting update. But as always, we'll just have to see if our orthopedic friends will decide to get on board with that as well. The second article that I saw this week that came out was an interesting story that was in the Dear Abby column. Did you ever see that in the newspaper when you were a kid? Well, it hasn't gone away, although newspapers have kind of gone away. But her daughter still carries on the Dear Abby column. And there was a lady who wrote in about her dental hygienist, basically stating that she felt like the dental hygienist was not very clean. She was showing up to work maybe a little bit dirty. Her hair was a little greasy. That being said,
An unhygienic hygienist.
That's correct.
Okay.
But to make it worse, her operatory was not overly hygienic either. So it really hit a head when she opened up the upper cabinets to see all the junk and other things that were being housed inside her workspace. So the lady wrote in to Dear Abby wanting advice on what she should do to deal with her unhygienic hygienist.
Called it.
Dear Abby stated, you should confront your dentist and tell him because he probably doesn't really know. And I made me think, I wonder what the perception is of my hygienist or my team members by patients. Do they come across as clean and well kept? Sometimes I wonder if I come across as clean and well kept. If it's been a bustling morning and my hair is up in a bun and looking a bit disheveled. And then when you open up the upper cabinetries or other cabinets, how much do we really disclose about the cleanliness of our workspace? So not to judge the hygienist, I thought it was a really interesting opportunity for us to look at our own operatories and our own practices and our own people to remind them that patients are observant of both our cleanliness and our activities within our operatory And maybe it's a good reminder for a little bit of a cleanup in January. A new year, new you.
You got to get the Swiffer with the extending arm.
Exactly.
With that top shelf. Yeah.
Exactly. Caviside the crap out of that space. The last article that I wanted to mention, I thought was really interesting. Smile Direct Club has just recently received yet another lawsuit. This is not new for these comrades in the clear aligner therapy world. But what is interesting about this one is what it is highlighting about their business practices. This lawsuit came out of Washington, D.C., and the Attorney General for Washington, D.C., not a federal operative, well, kind of, but within that district. The lawsuit is against Smile Direct Club because they require that after a certain time period under treatment, you're sent an NDA to sign that if you ever want to be eligible to receive your money back because you're dissatisfied with treatment, just sign this NDA, which states that you will not go online and leave a negative review, talk poorly about your experience, file a lawsuit against the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the lawsuit coming out of DC states that this is likely not best practices for a company.
They don't disclose that at the beginning of the process.
Nope.
It's sometime along the way.
Sometime after treatment has started.
Interesting.
And it shuts down the consumer's opportunity to voice concerns about medical treatments, which is really critical for scientific discovery. So I think this case may have some actual legs to it. I think it could be very interesting because if that's how Smile Direct has sort of controlled some of the bad press that they have received over the last few years and poor outcomes, it's not to say anything negative about them. It's just very well documented at this point that they have had consumer issues. But if they're able to keep that under wraps through these NDAs, this may bring light to some interesting business practices that are currently being had. And I wonder if it's Smile Direct Club alone or some of these other direct-to-consumer products for clear aligner therapy as well. So we'll watch that to see what's coming. Of course, we had a giant funding bill that came out of DC late last night. If you were up at 1:30 in the morning, you saw it hit the desk. So this will be the federal funding budget for 23. We'll see what comes of that. There's a lot of meat, fat, whatever you want to call it, housed inside, and who knows what the impact will be for oral health campaign, oral health funding, and the like. So we'll keep you posted as more details come out about that. And Brian, with that, that's the news.
Great job.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have company.
I did hear that.
I love the support.
Brian,
Right?
that was, JB, as always, it was great. But Brian, the commentary was potentially even better.
I like that. We need a color commentator.
Kind of roll the red carpet out.
Okay, we'll just make
You
it really
start
awkward
like
then.
the limo pulls up, and then okay. So the limo is pulling up now. The red carpet is around JB and Brian's screen, and here is our guest.
Dun, dun, dun! Dr. Alexandria Russ is joining us this evening. Thank you very much for allowing me to sort of Instagram stalk you. And then we have a mutual friend with Dr. Carla Soto, who has been a great friend of the show and a good friend of mine as well, who made the final connection. So I wasn't super weird on Instagram and got her on with us this evening. We have a lot of mutual background information. She is a Coice graduate as of recently, as am I. And Jeff is a clinical instructor or a mentor. What's your level? Or scientific advisor.
Mentor and past scientific advisor.
Right.
The science
For the
just
Coice Center.
passed him on by.
I tell ya. So we're also big fans and big friends of the Coice Center here as well. But she just recently opened her own practice in Boulder, Colorado. So can't wait to hear about that journey because I think it's always really interesting to hear. There's a lot of dialogue right now about dentists going out and opening their own practices post dental school with the debt and all the things. So I'd love to hear how you're balancing all of that. But after graduating, she decided to do some extensive traveling and in the process is moving her advanced degree through sommelier as well. And so very excited to have her on to talk about some different wines that she's chosen for us to taste, and maybe how she's integrating both her love of wine and dentistry on a daily basis. So thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's funny, as soon as you reached out to me and invited me, I went down kind of a deep dive looking at what you guys do, and it's so fun, and I'm really honored that you wanted me to be part of the show, so thank you.
Well, you married the two things that we all love a lot. You are the perfect package for us because we like wine and we mostly like dentistry, so you're kind of a great marriage.
Wine a little bit more.
Wine
A little bit more.
Pair well together. I think they pair quite nice together.
They do.
agree.
Yeah.
You know, and it's also great that she can be here for the first episode of the Brian and Jennifer podcast. So I mean, that's
Hey, Brian.
fortuitous.
It's a big honor. I've heard a lot
Hold
of
on just a second.
Yeah, it's
here. Yeah, there we go. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So why don't you talk to us about our newest or our first wine, our Côte d'Alsace. Did I say that correctly?
No, it'd be Cremant.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. So.
Oh, it's a
what-
Cremant d'Alsace.
Yes. And do you guys know what Cremant is? Are we familiar? What's our wine knowledge at this point, everybody? I'm curious.
assume
Actually-
basic because our audience will be very varied as well.
Okay. So
And
pretty.
I'm intermediate, I would say.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
We
Yeah.
generally don't buy wine at the gas station.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's
Yeah.
a
Well,
Sometimes
actually,
you get
Chad
roped
said he
into
was
some
great.
Manischewitz.
No, I would
Yeah.
just like to, for the record, say that Buc-ee's does have a very nice selection of wine,
Okay, yeah, I take that back.
Or-
I take that back.
vino, as they call it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So something really quick that I'd love to share, just generally about wine that I love, that kind of drew me to it from the start, is that wine is one of the few things that, you know, it really reaches so many different branches. There's obviously geology, history. You have the central part of drinking it and smelling it, and then you of course have the personal stories and the travel part and weather and soil. And it's one of these really interesting things that, like, I love to use this metaphor, but if you went to the Colosseum and showed up and didn't know anything about it, you'd walk in and be like, this place is old and probably someone should renovate it, right? You're like, have no connection to it at all. The second you start to look at a little bit deeper under the surface of why this wine might be a certain way or what ties this to a particular region, it totally has a shift in your participation of enjoying it. And so that's kind of what made me start to love it in the first place. So just a quick aside, but yes, so we should be, I want to drink all of these with you guys, but it's kind of fun to go through, and I'm going to walk you guys through just a really general tasting of what we would do in the wine world if we were analyzing a wine. So have any of you done this before?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm gonna really distill it to some like really key points that I think are interesting. That even if you've never done this before, I think it's a really nice starting point. But see, smell, taste, right? So we want to look at it, we want to smell it, we want to taste it, we want to think about it. That's pretty much all we're doing to all three of these wines. And there's a lot that each of those different senses can actually tell you about the wine itself. So, for instance, the seeing. So color itself, and I chose two, and I don't know if any of the listeners or you guys got the wines. Jeff is drinking Manischewitz up there. But the color actually tells you quite a bit.
It's Horashevitz.
Oh,
Yeah.
Even better.
Custom. Yeah. That's a custom made Concord wine made just for me. Just saying.
I can't believe that I should have put that in part of the tasting. Big miss.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should have. Next year.
Some people are more important than others on this show and maybe should have their own show before two other people do. Just saying.
That wouldn't be us, Jeff.
All
Just
right.
like that science passed you by, I think this show passed us by.
Okay, Chad, one of these days you'll get your red box too, okay?
Yes. Okay.
So yes. So color. The biggest things that you want to look for is, well, first off, everyone likes to talk about the legs, right? Like, oh, look at those legs. And that's like a common thing that people like to talk about. Do you guys, anyone know what the legs actually mean? Calling on anyone?
Yeah, it's everything that falls down on the side of the glass, how long it takes. It tells you about the body of the wine.
Yes.
Yes. Viscosity.
The viscosity. So wines that have high alcohol or high sugar, or just have a lot of extract in it, you're going to have these big legs. So it's going to tell you a little clue right in the beginning when you're looking at these. So it's already going to tell you a little bit before you get to smell and taste it. The other interesting thing about color is depending on the pH, wines can be, they can appear more red or more blue. And the ones that appear more red are actually higher in acid on average. So it's great because we chose Beaujolais and a Chateauneuf de Pape, and this one is super high acid, and this one's a little bit lower acid, and it's so obvious. I mean, you can tell this one's almost like purple in terms of the blue and purple hues, and this one's got more of that blue brick red.
Which of those is higher in acid?
So red is going to be higher acid.
Okay, and but with the Chateauneuf de Pape or the
sorry, the Chateauneuf de Pape does have more acid than the I had that backwards.
Interesting, because that's mainly a Grenache grape, right?
GSM, but there can be 13 grapes where they are doing the blends, but Grenache is most of it. So yes.
Yeah, I never knew that to be more acidic. I've learned something already. So
cool.
Go on. Keep learning me.
So the last thing with color that's really interesting is just how opaque the wine is. So if you're looking at a grape and it's almost like you can see right through it, you're probably dealing with a grape that had thinner skins, like a Noir or a Gamay or even a Barolo. These tend to have much thinner outer skins, so you can actually get less color. But a grape like Syrah, Cabernet, these are going to be really robust, thick grapes. So, I mean, you can honestly look at a wine and you can already kind of start to narrow it down what you're drinking just based on what it looks like. So, that's a quick site note that I think is helpful. As soon as I started recognizing that, it made wine drinking a little bit more fun just right out of the gate. Smelling. Super fun if you can smell and you're not sick of COVID. But yeah, I think the best thing to do is just try to pull 3 fruit and then 3 non-fruit flavors out of it. And once you're I think when you start to develop a palate and smell more, you start to almost have this library of aromas, and it's much easier for you to pull things. Like when I first started this, and by the way, I grew up in like a beer family in Chicago. So I didn't have like a ton of wine growing up. I didn't have this developed palate going into my 20s. I drank boxed wine, 2-Buck Chuck. And it wasn't until recent years that I really started to get into some of these other wines. And by the way, you don't have to spend a lot of money to have outstanding wine. And that's probably one of the coolest parts about just learning about wine generally. So the last one's taste, and you're really just looking at a couple things: sugar, acid, tannin, alcohol, and kind of how these are intermingling between each other. So this is kind of a very general overview of what people in the wine field are looking at when they're doing all their looking and swirling and tasting and smelling. This is kind of a more distilled down version of what that is. Jeff, anything to add since you've got the intermediate?
No, nothing. I'm taking it. What I learned about pH was already really interesting to me. So I'm just excited to be, as Chad would say, the sponge tonight.
Great. Okay.
Can you? I've always wanted to know, and I'm sure it's a very simple answer. When they structure a wine tasting, it always starts often with a sparkle, and then moves through usually whites and reds, depending on the type of wine tasting. I'm sure there's a sophisticated scientific reason why you start with bubbles and then sort of move your way through. Any guidance you can provide me?
So are you asking more so to if you were to offer this to like guests at a wine event, or are you wondering why?
yeah, it seems to be a very consistent pattern for most wine tastings that you attend, that we start with a sparkle or something and then sort of move our way through more complex wines.
So the whole idea behind that is you don't want to tire your palate out, right? So if we're like starting with a Barolo, if I try something really nuanced like Pinot Noir afterwards, it's going to be dead. All I'm going to taste is the bubbles. So you kind of want to work your way up to it. Generally, you would want to go from lower acid to higher acid, lower tannin to higher tannin, kind of less body to more body. I think body is the best way of guidance, but if you're not sure quite yet how to gauge that, taking those other things into account, acid, tannin, sweetness, obviously the dessert wine would be at the end as well. But yeah, great question. And actually, this is something that I don't love about all the different, the wine advocate, wine enthusiast, all these different grading levels that you see, like the points, 93, 94, whatever. It's not that they don't hold merit. I think some of them do, but I learned throughout this process that a lot of these people are actually trying anywhere from 70 to 150 different wines in one sitting. And even if you space those out appropriately, like I just don't see a scenario where someone is accurately saying and being able to justify a 93 versus 94 here. So I kind of started putting those aside and just making my own judgments and taking my own notes because, some of them I think are better than others, and who knows. But just know that I wouldn't take those so seriously, and I think there's probably politics involved and other things that I would trust your own palate over someone else's, because no one knows what you like more than you.
That's
was my question.
I was going to suggest that they add decimal points.
What's that?
I was going to suggest that they add decimal points after the 93. I think we have to be at least 10th of a point to really understand.
It's going to be like 4, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chad. I stepped on you. What were you saying?
No, I said that was JB asked the question about the tastings, which I thought was a fantastic question. My question was going to be about the rating, like 90 points, 92 points, 91 points, whatever. I mean, is it worth a damn, or is it just kind of like
they don't ever advertise the
best
70
dentist in Myrtle Beach, I mean, you don't know. I mean, did they pay for it or did they really get that taste,
I have my doubts personally. And I've been to a couple different wineries in Europe and the United States. I'm sure you guys have too. And if you talk to the winemakers, they're pretty transparent about the fact that this point system isn't really what consumers think it is. And so I really encourage people to just dial in on your own palate. What do you like? Don't rely on these other people to tell you what's good, because you're probably just going to, in some cases, maybe overpay for wine. If anything, it'll be fine, it'll be drinkable. You can probably find an insane wine at a better value if you just, have a kind of an experimental attitude towards it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, why don't we take a deeper dive into the wines that we have and maybe teach us about what we're drinking?
Yeah, for sure. So you guys already got to toast to your end of year, so I want to do another toast. I'm so honored that I get to be on for the very last one, and why not do it with Cremant? So cheers to that.
Cheers.
Cheers to you. Hey, do you know why we use the wide champagne flutes?
Why is that?
Because people of my particular ethnic background sometimes get their nose caught in the little narrow, tall ones.
I thought you were going down the Marie Antoinette path.
I do. You know what, though? I do prefer the classic look of the traditional.
But also the nose.
Yeah. But, if you're really going to get the nose in there and experience the smell, you don't want to get it stuck.
Fair. Yes. You get a really good smell that way, but.
That's right.
So yeah, we're drinking Cremant d'Alsace. And, this was one of the first wines that I drank that was sparkling, traditional method, outside champagne. And champagne's lovely. I love champagne. But champagne I think for the if we're just looking at value alone, you're not always getting the best value, right? They do a method called traditional method where they go through a double fermentation. So they ferment all the wine and then they actually bottle it, and then it undergoes a secondary fermentation, and it's actually a very rigorous process, and it takes a lot of hands to create this. And so because of that, it does increase the cost, but also supply demand, because there's not a ton coming out of Champagne and it has the name that it does. People will pay for it. And frankly, it's delicious, and I pay for it sometimes too. But, if it's a Tuesday night, you want to celebrate with something, Cremant is just absolutely one of the best wines. I really have a love for it. Alsace is not the only region that does it. Loire makes amazing Cremants, and so does Languedoc in the very south of France. And so they still do the exact same way of making it. So it's the traditional method where it's initially fermented, and then they do the secondary fermentation. They riddle the bottles. They're doing all the same things that they do in Champagne. But, this bottle, you can get a bottle of Grand Cru, $30, $40.
Wow.
You're paying easily $150 in Champagne.
Will they add any? Are there any other grape varietals that may enter where traditional Champagne is always going to be, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir? Are they going to bring any other grape varietals into it?
So there's 6 grapes that they can use for Cremant and Alsace. And in Champagne, they can only use Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and then a grape called Pinot Meunier.
Yeah.
And they're delicious, but it's actually really cold in Champagne. So you're getting this really high acid, not a ton of fruit, more of those brioche bread notes. And in Alsace, because it is a little bit warmer, and they're making sparkling wine from Pinot Gris, they can make it with Riesling, they're doing it with Pinot Blanc, and sometimes they're even doing blends of these wines. And then undergoing the same process, you get these just absolutely fascinating wines that have all those same red brioche notes. It is a law in Alsace. They actually have to age the wine for 9 months, and then they store it in a barrel for 3 months before they release it. So it's undergoing a really rigorous aging process. Do you guys all know what lees are and why that's important for sparkling wine?
Mm-mm. What?
Lees?
Lees?
Yes.
No.
So there's a yeast as it is undergoing the fermentation process. There's a yeast that rises to the top, and with Champagne, they leave the yeast in the barrel because they wanted to impart some of the flavor. So that's where when you're smelling, especially Champagne, less so in Alsace, but Champagne has these big brioche, bread, dough, yeast notes, and that's all because they actually leave that yeast sitting in there for up to a year even. And then they take the yeast out, and then they of course clarify it and make it look all pretty. But most of the time that it's aging, it's just filled with all this yeast, adding wonderful thick body and red notes. So you'll get a little bit of that on this Alsace, but it's not quite as intense as it would be in Champagne. So,
quick question about there's when you think about sparkling wines, you see words like Brut or Cuvée or Cremant or Champagne. Like, what are the different terms related to sparkling wines?
Yeah, so some of them have a denotion towards the amount of bubbles. So like in Italy, there's pétillant, which is basically like just a little bit of bubbles. It's not going to be like champagne, right? And then they have frizzante, which is another one in Greece, I believe. And then the ones that you guys are probably most familiar with is Brut Nature, Brut, Demi-Sec, Sec, and the sweetest one, which won't come to me. But basically, the Brut Nature, if you want dry wine, 0 sugar or next to 0, Brut Nature is the best. Brut is what everybody knows, and it actually does have a tiny bit of sugar. It's pretty negligent. I think it's 1 gram per liter, so 1 gram in the entire bottle of wine. So that's those are kind of the most important words, I would say. And then obviously Champagne, you mentioned, Cremant. These are just regions. So Cremant is sparkling wine from France. Champagne is sparkling wine from Champagne. And then anything outside is just sparkling wine. So we see Champagne all the time on like American bottles, like to put it as a advertising, but it's not actually Champagne.
Right.
Sparkling wine.
Alexandria, would you, and if you don't mind, as we go through the wines, actually Merlin Omer just asked us if you wouldn't mind mentioning some of your favorites in the varietals that we're trying tonight. If you wouldn't mind mentioning some of your favorites outside of the ones that we're actually drinking.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's funny. Everyone has a different relationship to wine, and I've been studying it now for, I don't know, 6 years or so, formally. And my initial attraction to wine was really just like understanding the science and understanding why things taste a certain way, and getting into the geology. And it's so funny because I find myself around big wine people, and they love to like specifically the Napa crowd, the people who have like the cult following in certain Napa wines, and they have so many different producers off their tongue. And that's one thing I will admittedly say that I'm not kind of like as at least not outside of France as can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfectly.
My screen went funny. I can't see you guys anymore, but I assume you're still there.
We're still here.
Okay.
We're still here.
So I don't actually. My relationship with wine is more on the scientific level. So it's so funny. I just want to admit my shortcoming of actually not being as attuned to tons of different producers. So I'm constantly getting, questions. What about this producer? I'm like, honestly, I don't know. Let's try it together and see what it tastes like. But I do have a couple favorites here that I'd love to share with you guys. So if we want to move to the next wine, actually, I think the Gamay would be a nice next wine to try.
Can you come back to me on
the
that
Gamay
one?
is going to be the Beaujolais. Yeah.
Beaujolais.
I'm going to try. My screen's acting funny. Okay. So quick hit. Beaujolais. It's the ousted grape in France. So Burgundy, it used to actually be part of Burgundy, believe it or not. And if anyone's either been to Burgundy or knows anything about Burgundy, people from Burgundy are very proud of the wine coming out of Burgundy, and rightfully so. In my opinion, it's my favorite region as well. But apparently during the 1700s, they thought it was too easy to grow, and they actually ousted the grape altogether. They said, Gamay can't grow here. It's too easy. We want more of a challenge, and you guys are your own region down there. So if you look at it on a map, it's literally, it's right next to Burgundy, and it's so close that even the climate is quite similar. So let's start there, because Burgundy is renowned in the world, is many people would recognize the best region for wine in the entire world. And this is a stone's throw from Burgundy. And so a lot of wine lovers are totally obsessed with this wine because it's also an insane value. And it comes with this really wide range of wines that you can find. So you can get Grand Cru wines that are really robust, big wines, Cabernet style, a big body, big tannins, and then something like what I'm drinking tonight, which is Beaujolais Nouveau. And you guys have probably all seen this bottle at some point in your supermarket. It's or wine shop. It comes out every November 3rd, and it's a really funky wine. They started doing it in the 50s, but The wine undergoes carbonic maceration, and it was kind of like it was kind of like this novel thing they were doing for a while, and then they started making a tradition out of it, and people really loved it. But I'm curious if any of you are drinking Nouveau or just regular Beaujolais.
I've typically had regular Beaujolais.
Yes, regular Beaujolais.
Okay, so
the Nouveau is a younger wine.
It's super young. Yeah, it's that same harvest season. So November 3rd, it's released, and it was just harvested, in August, September with everything else. So it's super fresh, it's super new, and then on top of it, they do carbonic maceration, which is one of the coolest things in wine. It actually undergoes fermentation in the grape first, and so the grape they're having all these little mini fermentations. And then it undergoes a bigger fermentation together. And for whatever reason, magic, it turns into these crazy, like bazooka bubblegum, Twizzlers, cherry, like just in your nose. It's the most fragrant wine you could ever imagine. And it's really interesting that it just does this. So I just opened up a bottle here and
the bazooka bubblegum, is that one of the 3 fruits or the 3 spices that you picked?
Depending on the day.
Hints of bazooka, old shoe, and couch with a sock in the crevice somewhere.
I think bazooka is the result of the carbonic matriculation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's not the
I
word
was going to say
John.
Yeah, so it's and you'll get a little bit of that in depending on what you guys are drinking. They do carbonic maceration and other Beaujolais wines. This one's just the most obvious, I think.
This is the most macerated.
Well, that one's more macerated than this one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, I don't know that I've ever had a Beaujolais before. It's
really good.
Really nice wine.
Yeah, and
would I be wrong to say though that it's not a really complex wine? Like I find it very kind of middle of the road. Like this would be a great crowd pleaser I
think this is the reason I chose this wine is because it's a really fun, interesting observation of what can happen during the winemaking process and such an obvious change on the nose and the palate. Now, would I choose to drink this, on the weekend when I really wanted to enjoy something? Maybe not. I think it's tasty, but it lacks structure. It doesn't have the complexity that you might get from a Burgundy wine. You certainly can't age it as long. So yes, Jeff, you would not be wrong. I would say that it's definitely delicious, drinkable, but I wouldn't call it complex.
No, I love. The taste, the nose on it is really nice. I kind of like when you go out and you do a lot of these tastings and you're waiting for all these kind of flavors to jump all over your tongue, and this is just. I would call this like a real crowd pleaser. Like what a great wine. Like everybody just comes in, you're hanging out in the kitchen. It's just a great warm up, I think.
Totally. Yeah. And it's an excellent food wine. I mean, the acidity, it pairs with pretty much anything. You could pair this with pretty much most things on a menu. And that's actually what most somms do. If it's kind of like the easy catch-all, if we're not sure what to pair, throw a Beaujolais at it. And Beaujolais typically pairs well with most foods in that way. So if you're not sure for sure, I would go that route.
Yeah, it's delicious. I mean, it's tasty, but I love what Jeff said. Just pairs with anything and just really not terribly complex.
Chad, you know what this would go extremely well with is Texas oysters.
It probably would. Yes, you're probably correct on that. I think you're going to pair more of a Lone Star though with a Texas oyster. The Lone Star beer. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Or a Shiner.
Shinerbach.
Or a PBR. PBR, yeah.
Jeff,
Shiner Bock would be too fancy. That's too complex for a Texas oyster. It's got to be a natty light or
Natty light.
Either way, it sounds like you're renting it.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm curious, have any of you tried any of the crus from Beaujolais? Because Jeff, you mentioned that maybe it's not as complex as some other wines, but there are some crus that actually do offer more complexity. Morgon and Chenas in particular have like these crazy bold wines coming out. And if you tried that, I think that you'd get a run for your money doing a blind tasting that.
Very cool.
Some Bordeaux
yeah,
for sure. So give it a shot. Morgon is my favorite region for Beaujolais if you're wanting something bigger.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very. Should we go to the third?
Let's do that. Okay, so I kind of selfishly chose this one because it's my favorite region ever.
Wait, what did you just say?
I selfishly chose this wine because it's my favorite region in all of, well, I mean, Burgundy's up there for sure as well, but this one was kind of the wine that made me fall in love with wine to begin with.
I'm just curious before we get too deep into it, is it see, we are huge fans of Grenache, which you don't hear many people say. I really like Grenache.
Grenache is great.
Yeah. And that always plays a big part in all the Chateauneuf du Pape region wines. So I'm wondering, I'm just wanting a little affirmation and not being weird in really enjoying a lot of Grenache wines.
Not at all. I love Grenache. In fact, you should check out the Loire Valley. They make wonderful single varietal Grenache. Obviously, Garnacha in Spain, you'll find amazing Grenache. They call it Garnacha, but it's exactly the same grape. And a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually the parent of Cabernet. So, it has some heritage that's important. And I like it because it's so herby. I mean, you don't have any other grapes that you get this like herby, vegetal leaf, almost like this really earthy, gamey, I don't know. There's something really ethereal about it that you don't get in any other grape. So I'm with you. I love me some Grenache. I think
so. Talk about the region, because this is, where the other regions are more in the east of France. Talk about the region a little bit that this is coming from, which is really more of the western side of France, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to give you just a general sense of France, you have regions in the north and middle and south. And on average, you're actually going to see a lot more white wine production in the north. And then it's going to go more red as you go further south. And that's because it's warmer and those grapes tend to grow better.
That's kind of true in the United States, too. It kind of gets more red the further south you go.
For sure. Yeah. That's funny.
Again, we said no politics.
No politics.
Only religion.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Only religion.
So stupid.
One awkward topic.
So yes. And the Rhone Valley, which is where this is from, is actually, I think, the best at blending grapes. So most other parts of France, you're getting single varietals, just the one grape, and they really want to have the most pure expression of that particular grape. But in the Rhone Valley, they break all these rules, and they do it so elegantly. They get all these grapes, and they actually have to blend them in different proportions every year. And you're absolutely right. Grenache typically makes a big proportion of that. In Chateauneuf du Pape, certainly, but not always. I had one the other day actually that was mostly Syrah. So you can find other ratios of the different grapes, and there's 13 different ones that they can use in the mix. There's even some white grapes that they can put in this, which is interesting. But it is a little bit warm, and it's this really kind of a narrow strip of land where they're creating these blends, and yeah, it's really everything's hand picked, hand harvested, so it's a very manual process, which is reflected in the price, of course. But it's one of those wines that the first time I had it, I was like, what is this? I didn't even know what it was, and I was just dumbfounded that something could taste like this. And the second you start to learn about the soils and why this particular grape tastes this way when it's grown out of this soil versus soil over here that's different and it has a completely different expression, it's just wild. It's so interesting. Like, why does that even happen? So Chateauneuf, in my opinion, is like pinnacle of the art of blending. Did I answer your question?
You did. No, thank you.
Is there a particular varietal that is the predominant grape in that Chateauneuf de Pape, or is it, or can that change, like percentage wise?
Oh yeah, it could change. It can change. They can pretty much do mostly what they want. Now I will say this: the laws in Europe are so strict. So you can't actually break the law because it's considered a food. That's why you see the AOC, DOC designation on the bottles the same way that you would on like cheese when you're traveling. It's actually under the same type of law. So you can't just decide that this time we don't want to age it for this much, or we want to add this other grape. If you do that, it's fine, but you don't get that designation and the quality level, at least perceived quality level, comes down. But it's interesting. There are some places like Italy, for instance. There's a part of Tuscany that they just completely they didn't care anymore. And if you know anything about Italian wines, it's very much like the culture. They do whatever the hell they want. And there's like exceptions to every single rule. And the minute you start studying it, you're like, there's so much. But they did something that I think was actually really valuable, and they decided in a certain part of Tuscany that they were just over these stringent laws. They didn't think that they were making the wines better. They thought that they were making them worse, and so they decided, I don't care. You take your designation. We don't need DOC. We'll be IGT, which is considered table wine. But we're making now super Tuscans in that region because, and if anyone's had a super Tuscan, I mean,
they're so good.
They're amazing. They're amazing.
Really good.
They broke the rules.
Favorite varietal in the world is the one that still sticks by the rules, though. Brunello.
Oh, Brunello's amazing.
Yeah.
Brunello, Barolo, those are the king. Those are the king. Yeah. Are you more Brunello or Barolo fan?
No. I'm a huge Brunello fan. I live for a great Brunello. Yeah. we have a good Brunello story, which maybe we'll share after, because that could take up a little bit. Yeah.
If you do end up wine tasting,
that's by far my favorite. I adore Italian wines, and Brunello is my favorite varietal.
Yeah, Brunello's amazing. I like Brunello.
But they have to stick by the rules.
They do.
Yeah.
And in some places, I think they should. Right?
Yeah.
But that's changing now too. With I think I just saw recently they're allowing some other grapes to be grown in Bordeaux now, which is a pretty big jump with global warming and climate's changing a little bit. So there will be some change that happens, and they're going to have to adapt the rules to fit what can grow best in that region, or else.
But what I notice about in some of the French wines, like they even dictate how much they can irrigate. Like there are rules about how much water they're allowed to give the vines. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about that.
I kind of love that, though. That's like one of my favorite things about the old world style of making wine, because in United States and in the new world in general, you could do whatever you want. You could irrigate all you like. You can put fertilizer in. You can put whatever you want on the label. It's literally all up for grabs. And I don't want to bash it, because I think we've also come up with some amazing new technologies around wine, and there's something to be said for that. But if I had to look at it for its artful nature, I just love this idea that you don't always have a good year. Sometimes it is just a terrible year. Didn't get good grapes, and this is the best that we could get. But then, you start to develop like appreciation for the cycles, the earth, and I think I think it adds more depth to the producer, to the wine. You're not trying to be anything other than you're not. It just exactly was what it was that year, and there's something beautiful about that I'm really attracted to.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, before we go, because you are a dentist by trade, and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about your current journey of recently opening your own practice and journey with Kois. And, that's our day jobs as well. We get up every morning and try to do our very best. But, I'm always fascinated with dentists who are embarking on their new practices and starting that next journey. How's it going?
Really good. I was worried about not making it to this because I was like running late, an appointment and this, and my Christmas party's tomorrow, and it's a funny day. It's just a lot going on, but I was working as an associate for a couple years, and I was fine. I was happy. I'm really passionate about dentistry. I really do love it, but I think I got to a point where I wasn't able to practice the way I wanted to. I wanted to get this composite. I wanted this technology, and I wanted this system in place. And it became, the more I learned, the more difficult it became to practice in a way that felt true to myself. And so I had to get really straight on my why. Like, why did I want to get this office? Because, a lot of people want things for different reasons. And I really wanted to, I actually took 3 months off work entirely between being an associate and buying this office. And I didn't even know in that time if I was going to buy the office. And I was kind of hands off throughout the whole point. I just kind of felt like it was meant to be, and we were going to agree to these terms and it would work out. But, I think if you're getting into practice ownership because you just want to make more money, or you just want to be the boss, or you just want to have more, control. I think those things all come with it, but I think whatever it is, and it doesn't matter if it's more money, if that's actually why you're doing it, then I think just getting straight on that is important. And for me, it was really just I wanted my own company card so I could go out and buy the best composite, the best of everything, just feel so good about what I'm doing, what I'm creating, what I'm offering. And I wasn't able to do that on my other office. So I think now that I'm in it, I'm in the thick of it. It's been 6 months. There's obviously challenges, things break, employees, blah, blah, blah. You have all these things coming up. And for me also, I really was looking at this as an opportunity to see what am I made of? I'd kind of grown out of being an associate, and it was great, and I enjoyed it. And I know many people do that their whole career, and I think that's lovely too. But I was curious of when faced with adversity that practice owners are invariably faced with, how do I show up in that? What does that look like for me? And how is that going to change me? And so a big part of it was that for me. And so now 6 months into ownership, no surprise that's happened, but I just, when it happens, I really embrace it. I'm like, okay, this is a problem, let's solve it. And I don't really let it bother me too much. So good. That's not to say I don't have problems and issues, but I think it's going really well and I'm enjoying it.
That won't
So
change.
happy for you. That's awesome that you were able to do what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And get things the way it's important, because I get it. I've been there, no, you can't have that. No, you can't have that. No, you can't have that, and it's, if you want to practice the way that you feel is the best for your patients, you got to go out on your own and do it. So kudos to you.
Yeah.
Guys.
Well, and I think for long-term satisfaction in your career, there's so many of us that are burning out and leaving dentistry altogether. And it's because we didn't know our why from the get-go. And we've sort of let the winds guide us in directions in our career that ultimately didn't lead to satisfaction. So I think your self-evaluation, your time of reflection, understanding your why to open your practice and do it the way you wanted to do it. If it's for more money, fine. If it's for having your name on a billboard, whatever it is. But knowing that why and always working towards that will be probably what keeps you from burning out of dentistry too quickly, which it's a very demanding and difficult career. Ownership is challenging. And a lot of folks are leaving. And I think you're a great mentor. Yeah. Yeah. I think you're a great mentor for folks.
So you know what I think, JB, is I think we need to get her back on as a guest in that capacity.
Yes.
Going from associate to practice owner and that transition. And of course we drink wine during that.
Yeah, she gets to pick her favorite, and we get to drink that.
Exactly. But guys, we have literally run over because of how much fun.
But we're having so much fun.
Yeah.
This was so educational and informative.
It was great.
So
Alexandria, we want to have you back, and I do want to have that conversation about going from I'm sorry, guys.
Which one?
My dog is in here too, and she has completely ruined the nose of my wine right now.
Yeah, well.
Oh no.
Yeah. I apologize. We have a 75-pound bulldog in the house and one that wants to kill this one. So I told my brother-in-law, just bring him in here. We'll handle it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm getting the nose of like 4-day-old chicken that's sat out for a long time. So, woo! Anyway, Alexandria, we absolutely want to have you back. Would love, especially your journey in going from associate to practice owner, and then like where your decision to do, like really significant CE, going out to COIS, and how that all played into where you are now. And absolutely, we're going to do it over some wine. And thank you for all of this. This was amazing. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. You guys are awesome. Cheers. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
This was fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely. Chad, will you close us out?
Yeah, I certainly will. I just want to say how awesome it is to have a guest that is an incredible dentist, obviously a very well-educated, well-informed dentist, one that really seeks out dentistry, but also seeks other hobbies and passions and can be passionate about both. What a great way to end the year. It's not all about dentistry. It's about everything else in life too. I want to thank our wonderful spouses, Jenny, Brian, and Ellen. And there's my Rosie girl. Wow. And I just and our pets. We've got
Marilyn. Come here, fart girl.
Yeah, we've got Rosie, we've got Teddy, and thanks everybody for another great year. We look forward to seeing you all in 2023, and there's lots of big things to come. Hey, who's our first guest of 2023?
John Coyce, by the way.
Dr. John Coyce. There you go.
Dr. John Coyce. First
Cheers,
guest
everybody.
of 2023.
Yeah.
There you go.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Jeff, you could have brought on the pig.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.